Good evening. Welcome to your Scarborough-Guildwood virtual town hall. This evening's event will be moderated by Antoinette DeNovo, Chief of Staff for City of Toronto Councillor Paul Ainslie. Antoinette, you have the floor.
Good evening. Thank you for joining your Scarborough-Guildwood representatives this evening. With us is the Honourable Member of Parliament John McKay, Member of Provincial Parliament Mitzi Hunter, and City of Toronto Councillor Paul Ainslie.
Good evening, everyone. My name is John McKay. I'm the Member of Parliament for Scarborough-Guildwood. I'm absolutely pleased to join my colleagues Mitzi and Paul this evening for this virtual town hall. We hope to be able to answer your questions. And for those questions that don't get answered, please contact my office. We are operating virtually these days, and you can contact us either by computer or by telephone. So let's have a good evening.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Mitzi Hunter, your MPP for Scarborough-Guildwood. And I know everyone is staying home during this pandemic so that you can all stay safe. So tonight we're here to answer your questions and to stay in touch.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Paul Ainslie. I'm your City Councillor. I'm very pleased to be here at a town hall meeting with my provincial colleague Mitzi Hunter, my federal colleague John McKay, as we all work together to keep the residents in Scarborough-Guildwood safe and well. And I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you for sending us your questions in advance of our meeting tonight. You are welcome to submit additional questions during the town hall by clicking the Ask a Question button in the lower right area on your screen. Let's begin with our first question. John, what are the available supports for charities given their lack of revenue?
Well, the big initiative for charities was the $100 million that the government has distributed among 5 charities, primarily directed at food insecurity. So for the big charities such as the Breakfast Clubs or Salvation Army and a variety of others, there is monies that are available for volunteers, there's money available for protective equipment, there's money available for food distribution. And that was the major initiative. The other major initiative was that not-for-profits, charities, are treated as businesses for the purposes of support for wages for those who are employed by the charities. So those are 2 very significant and recent initiatives on the part of the Government of Canada.
Thank you very much, John. This question is for Mitzi. If the federal government is giving $2,000 through the CRRB, why are OW and ODSP recipients receiving so little in assistance? Why have COVID-19 funds for OW and ODSP not been universally granted?
Well, what a great question. And, during the time of COVID-19, we know that those who are already struggling on low income are feeling this pandemic even more. And whether it's having to purchase additional items because of the pandemic in terms of, hand sanitizers or disinfectants and those types of things. And so I agree with you. And I've been an advocate for increasing income supplements. I know the former Liberal government had wanted to increase the base amount by 3%, and that was not granted. It was increased by only 1.5%, and that's something I'm on the record of standing up for people who are on ODSP and OW. Now, one of the things that the provincial government has done is granted $100 for individuals and $200 per family. And I really want to remind everyone who is receiving those types of income supports that in order to benefit from the emergency support, you have to speak to your case manager, your caseworker, and that assessment will be made and you'll be granted that amount. I just received a letter from the minister responsible for this file because just as you've asked, it should be automatic. I agree that we shouldn't be doing a needless bureaucracy and red tape at a time of an emergency and a pandemic. And the minister did reply saying that anyone who has already received approval will be getting an automatic payment, and that's going to continue on for May, June, and July. So that is good news for those that have applied. But to be certain, please be in touch with your case manager, and I'll continue to advocate for those who are on income supports to receive adequate amounts.
Thank you, Mitzi. Paul, this question is for you. What have you and the city done to support businesses?
Thanks, Antoinette. That's a great question. One of the first things that we did when this health crisis started was we've deferred property taxes, utility bills, first and foremost to help people, stay on their feet, trying to keep businesses open. We've just this past week, I wrote a letter to the Premier because I'm very concerned about the economic vitality of our community. I've talked with a number of businesses that are concerned about the programs they do get from the province, that it's really not enough to support them and maintain them as a small business. May 1st just passed, and many businesses are worried about how they're going to continue to pay the rent as they try and stay open, most recently with a curbside delivery. We're strong supporters of our local businesses through our business improvement areas, our small business programs. We recently opened a business TO support center and another program we call Digital Main Street to help local businesses increase their online presence, and also another one called Shop Here. So we're doing the best we can as a municipality, trying to make sure businesses stay open. Even here in Scarborough-Guildwood, as I reached out to the Mayor Tory recently, and I said, we really need help here in Scarborough-Guildwood. The majority of our businesses are actually small businesses with fewer than 10 employees that need those supports.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Paul. John, the next question is for you. Is there a national response in regards to the clear issues with long-term care facilities, and particularly privately owned facilities?
An extremely difficult question. The primary area of jurisdictional responsibility is with either the province or the municipality, but we have seen really across the country extraordinary infection rates and extraordinary death rates over the last 6, 7, 8 weeks of this pandemic. There is some considerable conversation as to whether these facilities should be brought into the National Health Act. That is maybe a longer term response. In the short term, we have the system that we have, and we are doing, the federal government is doing everything it can to encourage the provincial governments to be very vigilant on their practices. We have made the military available. Indeed, the military is at the Altamont Nursing Home, which is not in Scarborough-Guildwood, but is in Scarborough Rouge Park. But that's a very short-term Band-Aid solution to what is ultimately a very significant issue, and one that I think that once we're past this pandemic needs to be addressed, whether it's going to be a national program or whether it's going to be a review of provincial programs. Provincial and municipal programs. I'm not sure.
Thank you, John. Mitzi, the next question is for you. Currently, there is a limit of refilling prescriptions for only 30 days. This means extra travel time and added costs, especially for seniors who have to keep refilling every 30 days. Can you please let us know when we will revert to our normal refilling schedule?
Well, thanks for this question. And it's a question that I hear repeatedly coming into my constituency office, which remains open during this pandemic. Everyone is working virtually. We're answering the phones in real time, and also emails and anything coming through our website. And unfortunately, I've written to the Minister of Health about this issue, and repeatedly asked questions of her office because of the burden, particularly on seniors or those on fixed income, where moving from 90 days prescription with one dispensing fee to having to refill every 30 days is an undue financial burden, as well as you're saying, the frequency of going to pick up a prescription also could potentially put people at needless risk. So we're still waiting for a sufficient answer from the ministry. We're going to continue to push, continue to advocate on behalf of our constituents to say that this fee is unfair, given the time of a pandemic that has mandated it to have only 30 days prescription for those that need those repeat prescriptions. There was some good news announced today by the province and those that are on the Ontario Drug Benefit Program, that the fees will be waived until July 1st. So there's some movement there. There's also a study that is underway with the pharmaceutical providers to perhaps cost share in the pharmacists, actually, to cost share with the government, but there's no decision on that yet. And in the meantime, individuals are really feeling it in their pockets. So we'll continue to push on the prescription medication issue. People continue to write every single day into the office on this, and we're not going to give up. We're going to keep pushing.
Antoinette, if I may just jump in at this point, yesterday the Prime Minister announced a increase in the OAS benefit, a one-time increase in the OAS benefit of $300 and a $200 increase for the GIS. And it was in some considerable measure in response to the increased cost of poorer seniors filling their medications. So there is some relief, and that relief has actually been sent out and should be arriving in seniors' bank accounts very shortly.
I should also say that the province has also doubled the provincial program for seniors on low income, the GAINS program. They will now be receiving $116 a month through that program for those who need it. But I think that where this is getting everyone is that little ding every time you fill a prescription, and we want to address that as well.
Thank you. Paul, this question is for you. How will the city finance the $65 million per week burn rate?
Well, that's for us as a municipality, that's a huge issue, and I'm glad I'm here with my provincial and federal colleagues. When you refer to a burn rate, so that's a $65 million hole in the budget the City of Toronto is facing each and every week. And so our budget, one of the things we can't do is we're not allowed to run a deficit. And our budget comes mainly from two sources of revenue. It comes from your property taxes, my property taxes, and user fees that you pay for programs and services. So, and when you look at the burn rate, we're have a decrease in revenue. One of the largest decreases in revenue comes from the TTC, Toronto Parking Authority that runs the Green Pea lots, and then also from permit fees for parks and special events. And then we're looking at increased costs for childcare. We're trying to run childcare centers for workers that have been deemed essential. So all of that combined is hitting a $65 million hole that we're trying to figure out how to fill. At this point, there's no easy answers. We're having lots of discussions with the federal and provincial governments. Maybe it's time to look at a new type of revenue sharing agreement for all the taxes that are collected in the City of Toronto, for example, and municipalities across this country that go to the provincial and federal government. Maybe it's time to look at that model and see if we can do things differently as we fight our way through this pandemic.
Again, Antoinette, I don't want to jump in on everybody else's questions, but I think Paul has been a terrific advocate on behalf of the municipality. But I want to share with our listeners that the 416 caucus met with Mayor Tory virtually last Monday night, and Mayor Tory was quite articulate in his presentation on the burn rate, which is astronomical sum of money that's whereby the city cannot meet its outstanding obligations. The city is first and foremost the creature of the province. So once the negotiations with the province is completed, I expect that we will be asked to contribute. That is the next big thing. Like Wayne Gretzky used to say, it's not where the puck is, it's where the puck is going. Where the puck is going right now is with respect to the severe deficit of all the municipalities across the country. The number at this point is something in the order of $10 billion.
Thank you very much. John, the next question is for you. When will the student benefit be online?
Good question, to which I don't have a quick answer. I would anticipate that it would be shortly. I know that we stepped up about, I guess, last week to provide the student benefit of $1,250 to $1,750 per week. Sorry, I think that's per month. Sorry, and we also provided if you will, a $5,000 grant for those students who, over the course of the summer, decide to do community service. So both of those initiatives are quite recent. For further and granular details, such as when it's online, I would encourage the individual questioner to contact my office, either Natasha or Gabe.
Thank you very much. The next question is for Mitzi. Why is pandemic pay not extended to all essential workers? Example, pharmacy, personnel, and others.
Well, I mean, that's a good question, and it's something that we know when we think of our frontline healthcare workers. We were talking about long-term care workers just a few questions ago, and just the really valuable, but also the very risky work that they are doing right now by being directly on the front lines for individuals who have contracted this very deadly virus, particularly to those vulnerable seniors. And so the pandemic pay was designed for almost a recognition of the increased risk that those individuals will have directly on the front line, but also from a retention point of view, making sure that we have adequate staffing in those facilities to meet the need, and so that's how it's been defined right now. The minister has said that so it doesn't mean it's going to stay that way in terms of the current definition, but that's been the priority is making sure those that are working in hospitals, those that are working in long-term care, and in other areas that are directly dealing with those affected by the virus, and making sure that there's that pay increase in recognizing their service.
Again, Antoinette, I think you really are going to have to shut me up because this was also a recent initiative on the part of the federal government. The federal government just sent $3 billion to the provinces for low-income essential workers. Those monies would be distributed in accordance with the province's recognition of the needs. For Ontario, that would probably mean 40% of $3 billion, which is roughly $1.2 billion. So that's again a significant response to what everyone perceived to be a significant issue, and we're rather hoping that the province of Ontario gets that money out into the hands of the essential workers sooner rather than later.
Thank you. The next question is for Paul. Why did the City of Toronto not offer the same option for property tax and utility bills payments as did the banks who offered terms with interest for late payment applied?
Paul's got his mic on mute.
The federal government's always helping me. Thanks, John. I appreciate it. Federal government's helping again. Thanks,
Well,
Sean.
We're trying to give you your voice, Paul. Oh, yeah.
Just to reiterate the question, Antoinette, one of the things that we did do, and I mentioned earlier, is that right away we deferred property taxes for 60 days, utility bills, we pushed off for 60 days as well. We reduced, eliminated any late charges that anybody could face to try and help people out. Once again, property taxes are, our biggest point of revenue, so we can defer them or delay them being paid as long as we can. But 60 days was about as much as we could do with, and still try and keep the city running.
Thank you, Paul. The next question is for John. What are the precautions being taken to ensure the country does not fall into a second wave?
Well, I think we've been guided by the public health authorities to maintain the continuing social distancing protocols and hand washing protocols and things of that nature. I think the provinces have been quite responsible. I think the premiers have been quite responsible in slowly reopening their communities. There will be bumps. There is a kind of a criteria. Each province has set out their criteria as to what kind of numbers of new cases they see, what's the trend line, what's the, if you will, the number of deaths that are happening, and based upon that, then they will hopefully slowly reopen the economy. And as they slowly reopen the economy, we will get back to some form of normal, whatever normal is anymore. But we are largely guided by our scientists, and the scientists are frankly operating in uncharted territory. So we are being extremely cautious.
Thank you, John. The next question is for Mitzi. Mitzi, this comes from a gentleman asking on behalf of his wife. My wife's physiotherapy for a spinal cord injury has been halted. When will non-emergency routine treatments resume?
So, I mean, this is the unfortunate thing about this lockdown. It has had consequences on things that are deemed as non-essential or non-emergency. And Ontario's hospital system, our acute care, ICU was very well ready for that wave. And thankfully that wave, because of the measures that were put in place and the complete lockdown, everyone staying at home for really the last 2 months, that has contained the virus. And if you notice the numbers each and every day, they're going down in the appropriate trend. But there are things like non-emergency surgeries that have been put off, and the province has announced that hospitals can now start gearing up to do some of those surgeries. They've prioritized cancer and heart as the first ones. But there are other aspects, in terms of clinical services, therapeutic for chronic disease and those types of things that have not yet been given the go-ahead. I don't have a time for you at this very moment, but what I can tell you is that the province has outlined a 3-stage process in which the reopening will occur. As John has just explained, it's going to happen in a very slow, deliberate, and gradual way as much as possible. There is the need to balance the health risk that we are all making sure that everyone stays as safe as possible with obviously reopening the community and the economy so that we can continue to live as normal as possible post-pandemic and moving into the recovery stage. But we're not in the recovery stage at the moment. We are still in managing that crisis. and as a result, some of those areas, physiotherapy, osteopathy, those have not yet been given the go-ahead to open. But we're watching. There will be an announcement tomorrow, Thursday, by the province in terms of what we can expect in stage 1 of opening up. And so we're looking out for what is on that list. And my office will keep you up to date. We send out a daily update at around 5 o'clock every day after all the news is out. And everyone can sign up for that. You can just email my office, call, or send us an online request through our website, and we'll put you on that list to get those updates right away.
Thank you, Mitzi. Paul, this question is for you. Will the city be allowing park permits past June 30? Is there a timeline for this decision?
I won't say it's up in the air, Antoinette. It's something that we're continually looking at and watching. It's the one question I seem to be getting more of lately as the weather improves. We did close all of the parks to motor vehicle access. We put social distancing rules in place. When we looked at the areas in this city that had the greatest chance or possibility of people contracting the COVID-19 through community spread, that was the number of people that were using the parks. And so we made it's an unfortunate decision, but we put the social distancing rules in the parks. You can walk through them. We encourage people, to walk through them. Please don't picnic. We prefer that people don't sit on the benches and talk to their neighbors or friends. Mainly this is done because we're worried about benches can't be cleaned, picnic tables can't be cleaned. We're worried about people contracting COVID-19 by touching the tables or using them or spending too much time. But we are going to continue to review this with Dr. Davila, our medical officer of health, as the weather improves and as the numbers of cases continue to decline.
Thank you, Paul. John, the next question is for you. What effort is being made to reach out to the ethnic members of the community through social organizations and places of worship?
Well, my personal initiative has been to contact the various faith leaders and ask them to participate in a short video on my website and on my MailChimps and communications. I did that intentionally because this is both a Easter season, or was an Easter season, and now it's Ramadan, and most faith religions gather together to celebrate various aspects of that religious festival. So that was a particular initiative on my part. Last night, I and my colleagues celebrated Iftar with the Muslim community, a virtual Iftar. And so we have been asking our imams and our priests and our pastors to recognize the serious pandemic that we are in, the requirement that we do maintain social distance, and that social distance is a 7 days a week social distancing, and that includes Friday prayers or Sunday services. So those are the efforts that we've been making locally, and I think have largely been honored by the responsible members of those faith communities.
Thank you, John. Mitzi, the next question is for you. When will child care centers reopen? I rely on child care to resume work.
Well, that is definitely a precondition for moving through the various stages of reopening the economy. People can't go off to work unless they know that they have appropriate childcare. So right now there is some essential childcare centers that have been open. We've increased the number of essential sites that are open, but we are waiting for the word from the provincial government, and largely it's about the safety that will allow that to occur. It's a precondition for opening the economy is having an adequate and appropriate childcare available for communities.
Thank you, Mitzi. Paul, the next question is for you. Why are masks not mandatory for all of the employees and customers for all of the businesses that are reopening?
Well, there's a two-pronged answer to that, Antoinette, and it goes along with the social distancing question that I gave earlier. First and foremost, all the information that we have, and we get that through Dr. Davila, our medical officer of health. If you're going out in public and you don't feel well, if you have a bad cough or a cold, it's important that you should be wearing a mask. The masks that you see most people wearing out in public are not the N95s, the medical masks. They're the PPEs, and they will help protect you from coughing or the liquid droplets that they call it, dispersing those. It won't do a lot to stop liquid droplets from you inhaling them through that type of mask. So it's more of a health benefit for you to go out if you're not feeling well as a precaution to be wearing them. And then the other part of it is the supply issue. You'll see in the news lately the masks that everybody wants are the N95s in the city of Toronto, and I think federally and provincially we're trying to get those to frontline workers. They need those the most, that are going to look after healthcare workers, childcare, doctors that are looking after people that are sick. That's a real priority for us. Also, our employees that are working in our long-term care homes and shelters. So it's a supply issue on one hand, and also a priority issue as well. And I also would like to say that between the mask and the social distancing, I think that we're making a lot of progress, even here in Scarborough. The Scarborough Business Association this morning, the keynote speaker was Liz Buller, who's the CEO of the Scarborough Health Network, and the three campuses that they look after, Centenary, Scarborough General, and Birchmount combined, they have 50 cases of COVID-19 combined in all three, and Ms. Buller said that they're going down. So I think the work that we're doing is we're on the right step, and just ask people to be patient, and I think we'll get there.
Thank you, Paul. John, the next question is for you. Is the federal government equipped to continue conducting business effectively while working remotely with low contact interactions?
Wow, that's a very, very difficult question. It's funny, locally, we were just talking about this with my staff this morning, because there's some pressure on my office to reopen and kind of go back to business. And I was resistant to it because 90% of what we do is getting done. And so in order to be able to get the other 10%, am I going to risk the health of both my staff and the constituents that come in, feel that they have to see us? And at this point, the answer is no, we're not going to do anything other than operate as we've been operating, which is virtually. Now, if you take that answer and apply it to the federal government, I think the federal government is actually operating with some efficiency. In fact, my colleagues and I joke that we've never had a more responsive government and getting things done than we've had in the last 6 or 7 weeks. And I could recite all kinds of stories as to the alacrity with which federal civil servants have responded and got people what it is they needed in order to be able to do what they needed to do. And I'll leave you with one story, which is a story of about a local constituent who had a considerable supply of industrial alcohol, which was procured for purposes to do with his business. However, he thought that it would be useful to turn that into hand sanitizing And so he had to go through a bunch of federal hoops in order to be able to repurpose the alcohol. He got that over the course of a weekend, unheard of. And so I sent a note to the Privy Council office, the clerk of the Privy Council, saying thank you very much for the means, the alacrity with which you responded to my constituents' request. And I got a note back from Ian Sugart saying that they appreciated the acknowledgement. So the short answer is, I think the federal government's the writ large is operating quite efficiently and responding to people's needs in very difficult circumstances.
Thank you, John. Mitzi, this question is for you. Once our province declares that the state of emergency is over, how is it recommended that seniors who have no immunity to the virus mingle in the community again?
So, one of the really the unfortunate aspects of this virus is the toll it is taking on the elderly, particularly as we've talked about earlier, those who are in long-term care. Even in our own community here in Scarborough, we all know about Altmount and Seven Oaks, who are just experiencing the ravages of the worst of the virus. And even in terms of those that are dealing with the response, the personal support workers and those who are caring for those individuals. And so we have to take extra precaution and be double sure that the community is safe for the elderly and for seniors to re-enter. And my expectation, just from listening to Dr. David Williams, our Chief Medical Officer in Ontario, that's not going to happen until we're certain that they're, we have everything under control when it comes to testing, when it comes to contact tracing and containment for any individuals that are affected. Right now, we're looking for a 2-week trend of decline in terms of positive tests. We're seeing each day that the numbers reported are going down. We're all doing our best, but we're not there yet. And so, we do have a provincial order in place for anyone over the age of 70, anyone that is immune compromised in any way, to stay home, have neighbors, family members and friends, do things like grocery shopping and, helping out. I know I'm doing this for my own elderly parents. And it is because the risks are just so high. We talked about the risk of a second wave, and that's also something why there's such a careful reopening. Every step is being measured, every step is being monitored, because we don't want to have a second wave. So please be patient to all of our seniors. And I think it's great news that the federal government provided that little bit of income relief for seniors, and recognizing that the pandemic is affecting the elderly population. But the whole goal is to keep you safe. So the expectation is that even as things start to reopen gradually, those that are elderly or immune compromised will probably continue to have the stay at home in effect.
Thank you, Mitzi. Paul, the next question is for you. What is the timeline for the city's building department to reopen?
Thanks, Antoinette. The good news I have to say is our building department has started to reopen. It was once this pandemic started and we started looking at how we were staffing the city and what our priorities were. One of the things that we did was shut down our building department permits. It was part of the social distancing rules that we were trying to put in place to keep everybody safe and secure. So the building department was only operating, dealing with affordable housing permits, any emergencies that were taking place. So on Monday, we started reopening the building department again. Any permits that were submitted as of March 17th, we've started to process those and get the construction industry up and running again. We've also worked at modernizing it so that as you as a builder or a homeowner, if you need a building permit, you're not going to be expected to line up at one of the civic centers. You can submit the paperwork online. You can make payments online. It's one of those areas that the standing committee I chair, the General Government and Licensing Committee, looks after modernizing the City of Toronto. So with this pandemic, unfortunately, we've accelerated in a number of different areas, as I like to say, dragging the City of Toronto into the 21st century, and the building department is one of those areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. John, the next question is for you. This is from an employer. I would like to hire engineering students for the summer to work on COVID-related technology development. How can I register to access the recently announced 100% subsidy for program summer students?
Is it reference to the Canada Summer Jobs file?
Yes.
Well, the Canada Summer Jobs file is closed. Those applications had to be submitted early on in January and February. The first announcements are coming out tomorrow, and I anticipate that we will be distributing a considerable sum of money over the course of the next few days to those applicants who are successful. For those who have not applied, such as I'm assuming the person that's asking the question, I'd invite them to contact my office. I think that that's a worthwhile initiative if you are going to employ students to pursue some remedy of some kind or another. And if there is some way in which we could accommodate that individual, we'd be happy to do so.
Thank you, John. This next question is for Mitzi. Many employees are receiving bonus pay top-up of varying amounts for work during the pandemic. This bonus may put the employees in a high income tax payable bracket. Are the federal provincial governments providing any income tax relief for those working in difficult times?
It's a great question. So far, there hasn't been any signal that hourly wages or those types of increases or bonuses will not be taxable. The way the personal income tax system works, if you do earn a higher amount, then you pay a portion of that in taxes. I do want to say that, you know, one of the things that we have to be mindful of, and I know that we asked about the burn rate of the City of Toronto at, you know, $65 million. Is it weekly? That's weekly. And, you know, the Financial Accountability Officer of Ontario just updated an economic forecast. And this is a revision just since March. So you can see how quickly things are changing. And the forecast on the provincial government's revenue shows a decline of $23 billion in a revised expectation of revenue. So revenue coming in from corporate income taxes, from personal income taxes, and other sources of revenues that the province would have. And this is at a time when there is high demand and high expectations to not cut programs, because we talked about how people are dependent on those health services and the needs that we have right now. And so, you know, while I don't have perhaps the answer that you're looking for in terms of is there going to be consideration to not tax that income, there is a role that taxes play in providing those important services of healthcare, of education, and roads, and infrastructure, and really that society. And the role of governments. All three of us are here, federally, provincially, and municipally, saying, what is it that you need that we can be helpful to facilitate? And there is that role, a very important role that governments play.
Antoinette, I would be far more direct. Mitzi has given you the soft answer. I'm going to give you the direct answer. The direct answer is there will be no expectation, or should be no expectation on the part of anyone that any of these benefits are anything other than taxable. There is going to be a day of reckoning, and the day of reckoning is about this time next year. Mitzi has articulated brilliantly all of the monies that have been paid out and the helps that the federal government has given. The only revenue source that any government has is taxation. So it is an unrealistic expectation that taxes will decline. I hope I'm not being too harsh.
Thank you
Well
very
said,
much.
John.
Thank you. Paul, the next question is for you. Please clarify the social distancing rules for the general public. People need to strike a balance between caution and fear.
Well, I hope by now, almost 2 months into this, that everybody understands the social distancing rules, which is, and I've elaborated on this early, so I'll be quick. It's the 2 meters. You're out in public. You need to be 2 meters away from everybody. We want you to stay at home unless you need to go out for grocery shopping, a medical emergency. Stay inside, stay home. If you do go out, we're more than happy if you go out for a walk. Please try and stay with the members of your household. We do have a limit of the number of people that can, even within those parameters, it's limited to 5 people. If you go out for a walk in the local park, it's a limit of 5 people. If everybody lives in the same household, that limit doesn't apply. But first and foremost, as I mentioned about the masks earlier and social distancing, our number one priority is please stay home. Only go out when you really need to. And if you do go out, you want to go for a walk or a bike ride, please stay with members of your own family. And for the senior citizens out there, I hope this will be over soon. I do get complaints or concerns from seniors a lot about wanting to see their families and how they can do that. So if this all goes well, we can start lessening those restrictions and bring a little bit of normalcy back to people's lives.
Thank you, Paul. John, the next question is for you. Are tax breaks being discussed for individuals who are receiving hazard pay?
No.
John gets all the tax questions.
Yeah. Put it this way: I'm not aware of any tax breaks being discussed. There have been income benefits that have for those who are low income, working in various difficult areas. The government, as I said earlier, sent $3 billion to the provinces in order to top up the pay of low-income workers. But as to tax breaks, no. And I think, I don't want to be harsh, but I also want to be realistic. The federal government's debt to GDP has gone from under 30% to a projection somewhere between 40 and 45%. That is money that is borrowed money. That borrowed money we're all going to have to pay for. And so I would expect that there will be as I say, there is going to be a day of reckoning, and the only way in which the government is going to be able to get back on any kind of sensible fiscal footing, and this is all levels of government. You've heard Paul talk about his $65 billion or $1 million burn rate. I don't even want to think about what the federal government's burn rate is, but it's going to have to we're going to have some very realistic conversations with Canadians in the next number of months.
Thank you, John. Mitzi, the next question is for you. What is being done to allow for placement of foreign trained doctors?
So thank you, Antoinette, for this question. And I actually want to thank the residents of the community who have really stepped forward and brought their skills to bear during this pandemic. And definitely the provincial government is putting out a call right now. We have a shortage of workers in long-term care, and we need more people in healthcare settings, retirement homes, assisted living facilities, and there is actually a website that has been set up for people to apply. The government has also given a short-term certification for foreign trained medical professionals so that they can contribute and work during this pandemic as well, perhaps even gaining some valuable experience and skills. So this is something that I have put out information on. You can find it on my website through the daily updates that I put out. And we want to thank all of those foreign trained individuals that have stepped up and really put their hand up to contribute during this time, because we need everyone working. We're all in this together, and we will make it together if we work together.
Thank you, Mitzi. Paul, this question is for you. The TTC has laid off employees. Will the federal government be providing funding through the wage subsidy to the city to retain employees?
Hey, John, look, look, John, it's one of these working together questions, John.
Yeah. I've heard this question before.
Yeah. And before I let John weigh in on this, because I know John will want to, and we have talked about the burn rate of $65 million a week, and one of the biggest parts of that burn rate is supporting the lost revenue of the Toronto Transit Commission, and Toronto Transit Commission, probably the largest transit organization in Canada. It's very heavily used by the people in the city of Toronto. Unfortunately, right now it's at about 20% capacity compared to this time last year. So we have unfortunately had to look at laying off some of our employees. We're in negotiations with the union, because the last thing we would like to do is to have to lay off any of our employees. We would much rather see them redeployed into other areas. There are some clauses in the union contract that we're trying to work around. And, one of the things that stands out for me for the TTC, when we talk about trying to get this city back on its feet, is that when you talk about social distancing rules and the capacity of a bus or an LRT train or a subway car, they're saying that just to have the TTC at 30% capacity and following all of the necessary social distancing rules to get people to and from work or at their school or shopping, that even 30% capacity, we would need 100% of the vehicles that we're using right now. The difficulty that we have with the TTC is that when you put to run the TTC, 80 cents of every dollar that goes into the fare box is used to run the TTC, and we get 20 cents of the rest of it. The other 20 cents of the dollar comes from the provincial government. So those are kind of some of the dynamics around running the TTC. And now I'm going to let John weigh in, because I know the Canadian Emergency Relief Benefit, or CERB, the federal government. Wage subsidy, the federal government decided that it doesn't apply to municipalities. So if you are working with the TTC, the CERB doesn't apply to you. So, John, did you want to weigh in?
Well, the in-joke here is that I incorrectly answered that question in our last town hall. And Paul has corrected me to say that the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy does not apply to TTC workers. And he's correct about that.
Thank you, Paul and John.
Okay.
John, this question is for you.
Now I
What
get to weigh
steps?
in on yours, John. It's only fair.
Yeah.
What steps has the federal government taken to manufacture PPE, especially N95 masks in Canada?
Quite a number of initiatives, and I think primarily it's been a bit of fit and start. I think one of the issues that's arisen over the course of this pandemic is that it's woefully exposed our supply chain deficiencies. And again, I hope that that when we sit down and see what we did right and what we didn't do right, we'll recognize that we cannot continue as a nation to be as vulnerable as we are. So on the masks themselves, it's been primarily competition around the world to try and get masks and the rest of the equipment, for that matter, into the hands of the people that need it the most. And it's been fits and starts. You saw in the news the last couple of days that there was a shipment from China, and that shipment was defective, and the government would not pay for it. And yet it was a considerable size shipment. On the other hand, there has been some real cooperation with various entities to ramp up production, literally right across the country. And now it's a distribution problem. So I'm hoping that the next time we do this town hall, we will not be talking about the inadequacies of the supplies of personal protective equipment.
Thank you, John. Mitzi, this question is for you and a statement as well. I think speaking to the positive actions happening during the pandemic is important. So on a lighter note, could you share an example of how you've seen the communities come together?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. It's something that I witness all the time. In fact, just recently, we've had such a devastating toll on our long-term care and our retirement homes in Scarborough. So my office, in calling around and speaking to those facilities, found out that they were looking for just a little bit of positive news and a boost, because the news had been just really tough and very heartbreaking. So we engaged some local students who were connected to my office to make signs and cards. And really, they were given very little instruction. Just, here's the list of homes, go out and do that. And it was just beautiful what was created by these students, just how their heart spoke to their appreciation for those frontline workers and for the residents in those homes, and the smile and the cheer that it brought. I've since spoken to a number of the home administrators, and in the midst of all the challenges of PPE and keeping everything sanitized, they said that message that came through really touched us, and it really shows that it's those really simple things, those simple gestures that we can all do for each other that will get us through this pandemic. And that's, every person watching this broadcast and every member of the community, you can do the same. You can, write a handwritten note or a card, make a card and send it to a neighbor, send it to one of the retirement homes, for people who haven't been able to go outside, to just let them know that they're not forgotten. We still care. And it's a way of touching them just from a distance this time.
Thank you, Mitzi. Paul, this question is for you. What procedures is the TTC implementing to enforce the physical distancing order in littering on vehicles by their riders?
Sorry, there was a bit of a garble there, Antoinette. I missed the first part.
Here we go. What procedures is the TTC implementing to enforce the physical distancing order and littering on vehicles by their riders?
Well, so we have fare inspectors. We have the drivers are trying to enforce the rules as well. And it talks to what I said this a few moments ago. And part of it is just the lack of ridership. The TTC right now is operating at about 20% capacity to compare to last year. There's a number of people working at home now. They've been redeployed. And so, it speaks once again to the challenge we have around revenue at the TTC, but also it's kind of a self-regulating mechanism because we don't have the ridership on the TTC that we usually do. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That was our last question. We will now be followed by a message from each of your representatives.
So I think this is where I'm supposed to jump in. Is that correct, Antoinette?
Yes, it is, John.
Yeah. Okay, good. I thought I wasn't entirely asleep when I was following these instructions. First of all, let me thank Paul and Mitzi for joining me on this virtual town hall, and I want to thank Antoinette for her excellent questions, sometimes terribly difficult questions. And I want to also recognize particularly my staff, but everybody's staff that works on putting a virtual town hall together. And I want to just simply say to each and every constituent in Scarborough-Guildwood, please, please, please be safe. Recognize that there is light at the end of this tunnel, and that we will together get through this. Thank you.
So thank you, Antoinette. I just thought you did a great job moderating tonight and getting in so many questions. And I know that, maybe your question didn't come up, but our offices are open. My office is open. Send me an email, mhunter.mpp.co@liberal.ola.org, or give us a call. My message, I really want to build on my last question. I thought it was such a great question to think about what is positive. And when we first, I first did a teletown hall in March, there was a lot of fear in people about this virus. And since our last virtual town hall together, people were asking about the mechanics of, what was happening. And now this call, I feel that people are thinking about what's next? What happens beyond the stay at home, and how do we sort of get to the post pandemic with some degree of normalcy? And we know it's never going to be the same as it was before. There's so much that has changed, but we're such an amazing community here in Scarborough. We're so diverse. We care about each other, and one of the ways to demonstrate that, a lot of charitable organizations and nonprofits, they don't have a source of income coming in right now. And if you have any capacity, even in small amounts, to give a donation, please do so. Tomorrow I'll be joining YouthLink, who do amazing work with youth who are homeless or youth needing support. The Pathways to Education program is one of the programs that they run, and they're having an event. You can check out their website to see how you can get involved. Just in some small way or in some small gesture. Extend yourself to the community, because the community is simply just our individual efforts, our collection of individual efforts and intentions, and that's what builds the strong community that we have here in the beautiful Scarborough-Guildwood, with all of the wonderful neighborhoods, whether it's Bendale or Guildwood or KGO or Orton Park. And I started, probably shouldn't have started naming them, but Mornell, all of the amazing places that we have in our community, Scarborough Village, thinking of you guys as well. And just remember to think about that one small thing that you can do to help us as we're kind of getting into the recovery stage and coming out of this pandemic shutdown. So thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you so much for my colleagues, John and Paul. You're so great to work with. We really work well together as 3 levels and representatives of our community and our amazing teams of great people. They're so dedicated to the community. And so I really thank all of you, and I look forward to the next one.
Okay. And I'd like to thank everybody, Antoinette, my chief of staff, for moderating this evening, and all my staff that have been working so hard through all of this and continue to work very hard. To Mitzi and John, it's great to get together for another town hall and hear about the concerns in our community and the needs. I always enjoy working with both of you. As you've both said, we work well together, and I think that really reflects on how much we love the community of Scarborough-Guildwood, all the people here, and the businesses that are all working hard together to make sure that Scarborough-Guildwood maintains and is going to be the wonderful community it is. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening. And if you still have questions or concerns, please reach out to any of our offices. I also have a daily e-news blast that goes out. You can go to my website, paulinesley.com, or call my constituency office to sign up for it. And John and Mitzi, we're going to continue working hard together and getting the people of Scarborough-Guildwood through this. I don't have any doubt about that whatsoever. So thank you very much, everybody. Stay safe, stay well, and we'll talk with everyone soon.
And we should say Ramadan Mubarak to our Muslim constituents.
Yes, Ramadan Mubarak.
Yes, Ramadan Mubarak, Ramadan Kareem. I do want to mention that on Friday, I'll be doing consultations with small businesses in the community. So if there are any small businesses on the call, or you know someone with a small business, they can just contact my office for the link. I do sit on the Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs, which is feeding into the jobs and recovery plan for the province. So want to make sure that our local businesses get a chance to give feedback and to tell us what they need during this time of the COVID-19, but also in the recovery stage as well. So that's going to be an important conversation happening Friday morning, and would love to have you join as well. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Stay well. Thank you.
Thanks, Antoinette.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. If your question was not addressed, please forward it via email as shown on your screen. Have a good evening, stay safe, and be well.